I want to start with unpacking the term wellness. It is a very loaded term indeed. It has multiple dimensions as we understand it, also cultural nuances. Body, mind, consciousness, or soul have different interpretations across different cultures and the interplay thereof. However, let's zoom in. Let's start with something that's been front and center that defines the word wellness for most of us today, and that's lungs. Now, if I were to give you an interesting fact, if we were to unpack lungs, like smooth them out, they would cover an entire tennis court. Yes, that's how huge they are. And the airways within, they'll run all the way from London to Moscow. And let's not even get into the blood vessels and the DNA cells because we'll be out of this earth and maybe running to Pluto and back. Now, that is how loaded this term is just at the physical body level. And look here, I look to you to help sort of set boundary or context for us. Help us define, what encompasses wellness. What are the big building blocks you will put in here to define this term?
Thanks. So let me simplify it because, like you said, it's a very loaded term and everyone perceives it to be differently. But it's actually very simple. Overall wellness revolves around a paradigm. One is what we feed trillions of cells. Like you rightly gave the lung example, even the vessels of your heart, they can actually go around the earth 8 times, just to add another fact to that. That's the amazing intelligence of the human body. And I think along the way, wellness has forgotten to focus on the intelligence of the human body. And we're looking for quick fixes and things that can just get us immediate comfort and stuff. And that's where we're suffering. Wellness is actually becoming illness. To simplify it, we're made up of trillions of cells. What are we feeding these cells? These cells require food, nutrients from food, and oxygen from the air that we breathe. So nutrition is that simple. Am I either feeding the cells the right food, the right energy, which it will use the right way, or we're feeding it the wrong nutrients and the wrong energy? So the first part of the paradigm of wellness is nutrition, and it's unique for everyone. Everyone is different. I give the example of biometrics. Why does biometrics work? Because of its uniqueness, the fingerprint. Every fingerprint, whether even if you're an identical twin, it is different, okay? Which means we have unique requirements. You can't put yourself into a box and say, everyone go vegan, everyone go low carb, everyone go high protein. No, it's got to be for you, what works for you. The second pillar is movement. I won't even use the word exercise because people start thinking that, oh no, I've got to do some work. I'm talking about movement. The body is designed to move, as simple as that. So you come up with all these terms today, sitting is the new smoking, all of that stuff. Simplify. We're meant to move. The more you're sedentary, the more problems you're going to have. So we encourage movement as part of wellness. The third and the most important, equally to the fourth, is sleep. Sleep deprivation is the curse of modern society today. And no one likes to hear this because the moment we say sleep deprivation, it means we've got to compromise on the way we live, entertainment, social life. So that's the third vertical. The fourth is emotional wellness, your mental state, emotional behavior, all of these things together. And the fifth is governed by a very holistic term, spirituality. When I say spirituality, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about, let's talk about simple spirituality. Your body is a gift of life. Do you abuse this gift or not is the first step towards your spiritual path. So these are the 5 pillars that we break down for wellness. So when we put these 5 pillars together in the most simplest way, we create a platform of wellness so that the intelligence within us, whether it's the arteries, the lungs, all of that, the intelligence is designed to work for us. It works against us when the 5 parameters we spoke about are in misalignment with each other. So that's the simplest way I can break down wellness for you.
Fantastic. This is phenomenal, Luke. So what we are saying is, it's about enabling the intelligence to work for us, through nutrition, movement, sleep, emotional wellness, and spirituality. And I'm a student of Ayurveda, and I'm with you to say that, when it comes to nutrition or, how we are, each one of are composed is absolutely unique. How we look different is how we are different inside. Yes, fantastic. I think with that definition, let's proceed in this discussion. And, let's talk about how wellness has sort of evolved. So initially, in terms of organizations, they were supporting employee wellness, but more from a financial perspective, giving insurance support. Manish, I'd look to you to help us understand, how that pivot has evolved over time. Today, organizations are, going deeper and deeper, entrenching themselves into employee lives. Where do you think that shift happened and where are we today?
Thanks, Divya. I think the shift happened actually when we entered the pandemic wave one somewhere in March 2020. I think in India still there is a lot of stigma attached to mental wellness, and people don't open up and say, "Hey, I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling anxious." And sometimes it's kind of linked back to probably saying that you're not well mentally is not really a great thing to happen to you. But I think what we've seen is after the pandemic, people have started talking about mental wellness issues. They've been feeling isolated, fatigued, depressed, and now it's kind of quite open about the fact that they can speak about mental wellness issues with their employers, with their managers, and with HR also. So that's really been a change that I've seen over the past 1 year or so. Like you said, I think organizations have been heavily focused on mental and financial well-being. I think the big focus right now is on social well-being also. I think people are missing the human connect, being with colleagues and being in office. And we all are looking at innovative and creative ways to actually kind of ensure there are various social well-being initiatives to support our colleagues.
Thanks for that, Manish. And I would say, if I were to again keep mapping back to the framework that Luke has set for us, it's to say social well-being or emotional wellness, which wasn't front and center for us earlier, has come to forefront. Ashan, how do you see things panning out in Sri Lanka?
I think, correctly mentioned, a lot of organizations took by a storm when the pandemic forces us to work from home, and the usual relationships, the bonds that we had by seeing to people, talking to them directly, and also most important to understand if they're going through something was not there when you work from home. So I think what happened during this, I mean, if you take by face, how we were working on a more meeting structure was shifted to online. So it helped us, and we quickly, adjusted ourselves with a certain protocols, what meetings we are going to have our cameras on, and, what is our schedule is going to look like. For example, stand up is the practice that we often have every morning. Leadership 8:15, we meet up. Why we call it stand up is to keep it short. You don't, drag it long. So just have a quick stand up to understand how the day is, what is going to happen. So things like that kept us engage and to understand. Then we have the second stand-up call with your department where your team is there. In those two meetings, and also one meeting that we essentially ask people to have the camera on is during one-on-one. I think setups like that enable people to have the understanding of how you're faring during this situation. And also one-on-one is not about, how he has performed or what the business is going. It is more about how are you doing? How are you feeling? What is happening back there? Are you being, pushed to housework? That kind of conversation really enable while you work, on a corporate, very strict process, and, having those structured way of engaging them. We call them tools, while we have certain set of resources, and also there are opportunities out there in the organization. So those tools enable during this period for us to be adjusted and to be available to understand, our employees' pulse. I think that is something worked well for us during this period.
Thank you for sharing that, Ashan. And it's bewildering to me how we as individuals as well as organizations have evolved to work in the virtual setup, like you're saying, each one of us, equipping ourselves with different tools and enablers. But for now, let me teleport us, I think that's what it will require to be said. Let's think of post-COVID times. Let's think of work environment being hybrid. So we are at work, but we also have those flexible working hours. And look, I'll come back to you here to say that in COVID times, organizations have stepped beyond. I think I can speak for Uber and other organizations to us, supporting employees in every way possible. There was no policy, there was no documentation, but, there were employees looking for blood, you name it. And, there was support available from organizations. But let's teleport ourselves, right? To say, how do you think organizations can continue to support well-being of employees in that word in a hybrid work environment? What are those, some of those guiding principles that you lay down for us?
So I think, and I must say, I must take a note to say I treat a lot of people from Uber as well. And one of the points that came strongly out during the pandemic was the company's care to them, which went beyond policy. And this was with many companies. I'm just mentioning Uber now because you're there. And I think that's what really inspired people, because everyone has this perception of an organization, most people, that my organization, wellness, employee relation functions is a tick in the box kind of a thing just to keep us happy. But I think with the pandemic, with companies reaching out to their people, it actually built a stronger bond of loyalty between the company, people and the company. So I think, how can we take this forward in the future as well? Because what happens is, when we want to redefine wellness, when I look at most corporate wellness programs of HR around the world, we get pulled into a lot of them for advice. It's, I'm not saying they're wrong programs, but it just focuses on the same message to people: work out more, eat better. I think when I look at all the data, what do people need the most today to redefine wellness at a corporate level? We have to encourage sleep, and we have to encourage ways for people to enhance their emotional stability. See, I'll be honest with you up front now, because I talk to patients all the time, from corporates at CEO level to employee level. I think we're also going on the wrong track, trying to move this mental awareness into a big kind of a shell. Because a lot of these people are not mentally unwell. They're dealing with problems to adapt. Like, I didn't get my promotion. Doesn't mean you have a mental problem. You're dealing with disappointment. But now, because it's put into the umbrella of mental instability or emotional health, you start giving them tools which are used to actually treat someone who has a serotonin or a dopamine imbalance. So I think in the wellness program, while we can emphasize on sleep and teach them ways to sleep, emphasize on meditation, food, we need to teach employees, human beings at all levels, that all human beings have an ability to adapt. It's our natural survival instinct. How do we adapt? We have to train people to adapt. Today it was the pandemic. Next year it could be something else. But simple trainings on teaching people how to adapt. Okay, this situation happened. What do you do now? Because the first step is, I'm emotionally broken down. How could he say that? How could she say that? How could I not get promoted? And all these things happen. Of course, mental health comes in when people have lost family through debt, suffering, grief. But we even teach people how to adapt to loss. There's a way. There are ways that you do. So I think we have to move and redefine wellness at a corporate level. When I look at employees' health, most people in corporates are not sick because of food habits, which most of us would think. They're sick because they're tired, they're fatigued. And because they're fatigued, because they don't sleep at night. And this is not the company's fault. People want to do way beyond their company hours. They make the wrong choices of food. They're going high carb, high sugar. They wake up the next morning tired, too much of caffeine. You miss your workout because no one feels like working out when they're tired. So you see, at the top of the paradigm is sleep and emotional wellness together. When you're rested, you make better choices for food, to work out, to sleep better. But when you're stressed out and sleep deprived, the whole model below crumbles. So I think a model has to be observed, which is common to all companies, that it starts with sleep at the top and emotional. And they go together. We can't separate the two. Like, no employee can be a happy, productive employee if they're sleep deprived. Impossible. We know that scientifically, biologically, and physiologically as well. And I'm sure most managers will see that productivity goes down. That's why pilots are given certain amount of hours before a long flight, because they have to rest, because it's a medical condition that the cognitive power of the brain decreases if they don't get that particular amount of sleep. So how can we transition? And the beauty of the model I'm suggesting, and we practice it in model, it's inexpensive. The company doesn't have to spend money. The company has to educate, motivate, get people to track their sleep, run like competitions, part A of the company, inter-department, on people who sleep better, how they feel. It's really about awareness. I know companies who have spent millions of dollars on upgrading their cafeterias with healthy juices and, the seeds and the nuts and stuff like that. But there's no correlation in the improvement of the health of employees at a macro level. That's not the problem. It's great. Companies can do that, but we must explore emotional stability, giving them tools that when there's disappointment in life, what do you do? When something doesn't work out your way, what do we do? And encourage sleep habits, to simple ways of sleeping better. And of course, you touch upon exercise and everything else. So I think this will be what employees will expect. They want that connection, that we care about you at this level, and there is a method to the madness. Whether you go to a top doctor today, a nutritionist, a coach, this is the model that will be practiced along with your medicine, that you got to sleep and you got to bring down your stress levels. So we care about you, work and outside work. And this is what you're going to need way beyond your job. So that's how I see the model actually shaping up, which is really cost effective for most companies, and top down, which means the leaders have to demonstrate all of these things first and then trickle it down, because it's very easy for employees to say, oh, I do the hardest job, I can't sleep. Everyone can. We deal with the busiest employees, but yet they can find 7 hours to sleep if they're well organized and if the intention is there. So that's how I see it to be in the future.
Absolutely. And Luke, that's the beauty of this discussion to say, how can we equip organizations or all the audience who are listening to this session to say when they walk out of this, what are those tips and tricks that they should take back to their organizations? And I'm with you to say organizations are making a lot of effort. There is that intention, but maybe, it's not the right positioning. It's not the right place. And, like you said, it's about tapping into the inner intelligence or enabling it. It's to make your, employees, or let's say all of us, more aware so that in times of need, we are able to tap into that level of intelligence. Absolutely. And it's also to say that, giving them coping mechanisms. For example, for most of our sessions, instead of doing an icebreaker, these days I've started getting a breathologist in to say, can you help my people, know that they're having a frantically busy day? How can they calm themselves down? At the end of the day, we aren't able to switch off. What is that 5 minutes of, breath work that can help them ease into the rest of their day? So yes, there is a lot of conversation around sleep, but Ashan, Manish, I'm eager to hear your perspectives, not just from your organizations, but from outside. Do you see organizations trying to attempt to sort of weave in these elements together?
Yeah, I can go in first, Ashan, if that's okay. And I think I quite like what Luke covered in terms of, the areas organizations should focus on for colleague wellness. But I think just one slightly different point I wanted to raise is it's become slightly trickier with many colleagues working from home, where self-discipline becomes a big requirement. Like Luke said, probably sleep is something that the person has to manage on his own and ensure that he kind of takes time or she takes time to kind of rest herself out. And I completely agree with Luke that, if you are not, or you're sleep deprived or you're having high stress, then you can't be really productive as an employer or a colleague for the organization. And I think the big challenge is when we were working from office, there was this physical boundaries. There was the traffic that was picking up. There was a cab that you had to board back. There was a train that you used to take every day, which was suiting your requirements. There was a child that you needed to feed, or there was probably a need for you to be back home to attend to family matters. And so physical boundaries not being there, you can actually kind of meet your child, feed the child when you're working off, and then come back and whole separate. Actually having work hours and not overworking yourself is really important, and you have to therefore have a lot more self-care and self-discipline around the way you conduct yourself. And I don't think organizations are driving people to work long hours in this environment. It's about people are overworking themselves sometimes, and that's really not helpful.
So to add to what he said, I think as an organization, if you take a step back, I would say employee well-being revolves around employee career, financial, physical, emotional, and community. So I think while you manage all these aspects, it will help. Like you mentioned, the frustration that you get that you didn't get your promotion, your expectation and what is given is mismatching. So I think when you look at overall, yes, you have a physical, emotional, and community. Also, we have gathered into connecting with people to maintain certain level of engagement with employees. So these kind of things, if you adopt as an organization, I think you create that right ecosystem within your business. And there are three more elements which I find that is important in a organization to sustain this. One is empowerment. I think when you see a trigger point in your employees, there has to be an empowerment to make that person like a first aid person before you channel them into professionals, where the trained eye has to be there, either with your colleagues or with your subordinates or with your supervisor, to reach out to that employee moment they spot it. You do the initial basic before it goes to a next level of a problem. I think that is what lacked in a lot of corporates, where they have thematic programs, where there are thematic initiatives that is there, while you don't have that personalization in your business for it to sustain moment as employee or a colleague see that. That's when the awareness comes into play of the tools and the resources and the opportunities available within the organization goes void at times. And the other thing is equality. Now, when it's come to your wellness program, it is very, very important. It is not based on your hierarchy or the level or the gender or anything. If it's based on that, that's where people loses trust in your wellness programs. I mean, irrespective of the level or the quality, the year of service of yours, if you can reach to those people, the right sync is happening. I think that's when the organization performs the best on wellness initiatives. So that's pretty much what I want to add to the conversation, Manish, to you.
No, thanks for that, Ashan and Manish. I'm in agreement with you to say, with this new reality of virtual or hybrid work environment, how do we enable our employees to set those boundaries, which existed by the way of certain processes earlier? Or Ashan, for you to say that equality is absolutely important. If it's an allowance you're making, if it's a wellness day, irrespective, it should be consistent across levels and teams in an organization. Absolutely. Luke, before we close on this topic, I want to look up to you to say that, I'm sure you work across organizations in this world. What are some of those, say, great examples that you might have come across in terms of how organizations are tapping this entire wellness pyramid that you lay down for us?
So I'll call out a couple of things that impressed me over the last couple of years. Some companies in the Philippines, they did away with aerated drinks in the company premises. Drink out if you want. No one, not even at the board meetings, were there cans of aerated drinks, which I thought was pretty impressive because the whole company is doing it together, sending out a right message. Another company, again in the Philippines, international company, they would have these interdepartmental walking competitions. How many steps can you get? Today, you can track it. You don't even need a wearable device. You can do it on your phone. So it was motivating for teams. It was a great team building exercise, and it got more people active. But the best part of it is the GM of the company I was working with said, Luke, it served another purpose. It broke the excuse that, hey, I have a sitting job. How can I be active? Because people found ways to be active because it was a competition. I saw that happening. 3, this is something I've seen across a lot of American companies and Indian companies. Meetings have become shorter. They're not those long 1 hour, 2 hour meetings and stuff like that. People are finishing meetings faster so that you can do standing meetings. You don't have to serve snacks and cookies and all of those things and stuff. And I think the 4th is people caring for employees genuinely. Like both the gentlemen rightly said, there has to be genuine care because today employees are smart. They can see through. They can see through to-do lists of HR and stuff. And a lot of times they say, my company doesn't care for me. And I tell them, it doesn't matter if your company cares for you or not. You got to care for yourself and do it. If it's not your company's responsibility to have to motivate you to be healthy. They can support you. They can give you, programs, but you need to do it as well. So I think also there's a company in Africa. It's a coffee company. And what they started doing is they started teaching their employees how to manage difficult relationships, whether it's in families, bosses. They took out the top 3 stressors of employees, and they found out either relationship problems with sick parents, or problems with bosses. And they had a whole training module around how you manage this better. So you're not ever saying that you'll be in a company where you don't have struggles or indifferences with bosses, but you learn, you give them the tools that can overall bring down their stress. So these are a couple of things. And then cafeterias and offices, I've seen Facebook, Google, great food, yummy food, all of that stuff. So everyone's done their part, but I think it needs to be structured, and equal ownership or more has to be given to the employee. It can't be that my company is responsible for my health. No, absolutely not. So I think we can build a model, and after the pandemic, most people are inspired and motivated to take part in this. So now's the right time to get these programs really full-fledged and running.
Absolutely. And 2 points I'd, definitely like to bring about is to say employee care, to say, now employees know that the organization cares for them or not. That's one, right? And hence, how do your initiatives sort of really, touch them and appeal them? And second is to say, and I think that's a very valid point. And that's been a question in my mind to say, what role do we play as organization versus what role does an individual play in this journey? To say that the owner still rests with the individual. Organizations are enabling them, fostering those behaviors, but the owner still rests with the individual.
If I can add one more quick point, which is really important. A company did this and it worked beautifully. They sent a letter, an email to all the employees' parents, saying that you'll probably see your children working at home. And we want you to know what an asset they are to the company. They do this. Suddenly you had employees' parents feeling so proud of their children, because most parents think, what are you doing in front of a laptop all the time? Come on, you're pretending. You don't want to do any housework. You're just playing games all the time. And that broke so many myths between parents and children working at home. Just a simple letter going out. We are proud of your children. We've seen them work. Now you'll see them work, and they are supporting X, Y, Z functions. It just brought that proud moment. Employees felt happy, parents felt happy. So that's another impressive thing I learned from companies during lockdown.
Phenomenal. Another great example of how these thoughtful little gestures can go a long way. And, before I pass it on to Manish and Ashan, I want to quote something to say at Uber, we've been thinking about future of work, hybrid work environment. And, what's again sort of has been surprising to say that the culture activation, when we talk about, imparting or embedding certain cultural values, these days, wellness has become a lever to do that. To say that we can't maybe bring our employees together for a party, for a team dinner, but can we bring them together for a wellness initiative? The example that you spoke about, of employees walking together. So it's just become front and center for every possible organization initiative, even something like culture activation. Manish, I'd like to, get your views to say that what have you seen across?
No, I think Luke gave some very interesting and some great examples of what's happening across the world. Some examples that I would like to share is one, I think we should not forget the kids at home. I think as corporates, many of us have worked in the past from home, and many of us have done it because we found it flexible or easy to do that from home and didn't travel to office and kind of go through the mad traffic to reach office. But kids have been historically studying from school or institutions, and they've never been used to working from home. And in fact, unfortunately, parents are seeing that as a source of stress, wherein they're not able to kind of focus on their children's education and give them the required time and effort to actually support them in the education. So we actually organized a kids carnival. We ran it for close to 10 days. We had various events focused around kids, and probably children really enjoyed it. There were various events that kept them away from the gadgets, of course, they had to use because they had to connect on platforms like these to have those sessions. But there were some interesting sessions around how to solve the cube, how to probably do art, how to kind of do magic, etc. So those are really good. Parents really found that something that we did as an initiative, and that was really well received, I would say. I think we're also looking at various fun at work events through these platforms. I think people are genuinely missing fun. And when people are just working and actually kind of going back-to-back meetings, they don't get that opportunity to have some fun. So we've been holding virtual Olympics, virtual events, contests, just to have a bit more fun infused into the workplace. So that's something that I would share as probably something organizations should do. Look at innovative ways of bringing fun into the virtual workplace. Work from home and hybrid working is here to stay. Let's try and see how do we change the way we used to kind of get people together virtually and actually enjoy it. So that's probably mine. Over to you, Ashan.
Well, I think it has been almost 2 years we are working from home, and it has been quite a journey. So initially, we start realizing as HR, our engagement with the employees have extended into family, the parents, the children, the pets, to everyone. So we start doing, let's say a department came up with their own game of COVID dish, and it starts sharing in a WhatsApp group, and it caught up, and we have a newsletter called Keeping Up with the Keels Crew. So in that, those images came out, and those little initiatives. This was at the very beginning when it happened. So up from the time we went as a lockdown as an organization for these 2 years, we know. I mean, the advantage side of it is we know the parents, we know the children, we know how many dogs there are in that family, because we have transformed that into an opportunity to engage with our employees, to know them more. So when we take that, also what we saw is the traveling time has cut off, and we operate in multiple locations. No longer you need to have half an hour trip into the other location to have the meeting. So we always emphasize the opportunities while we see the challenges when we encounter. And also something that we have done is we have shifted from the usual traditional way of working. Because as an organizer, I mean, in my sector in particularly, we have a way of engaging with our employees over the past 5 years. So we believe if you define ourselves as an animal, it would be a cheetah. We run fast. We are very focused on what we want to do. So we have adopted a game over the past 3 years, which is rugged. Because in our organization, that's the biggest intercompany event. So we have sports personnel who's there, and about 15 of them working full-time for us. These are not contracted players working for us. So we have kind of changed our thinking of our employees using opportunities like that, so that it has helped us in during this situation of this. So we often portray them in our Facebook pages, internal events, because during the last lockdown we had a match and about 4 of our players were participating for that. So those informations were going on. I mean, so in our communication, it is not only about how the company is performing. It is about how our people have achieved out there, and this particular individual's fitness. And we have some of the rugby players doing all our wellness fitness programs, and basic tips how to do your exercises while you're at home. 3-minute video session series was on there, and things like that have really helped. And the nicest thing that I saw that was done in one of our organizations was working with your pet. So they have taken photographs, everyone working alongside the dogs, the cats that they have, has brought in so much that, it's bigger than conducting an event at times, spending so much of money. It's just allowing them to do their work alongside what they love. As a parent, my small fellow is playing cricket, and, only thing that was working is I'm waiting for a day, work from ground, that I'm going to take a photograph and I'm going to tell everyone, today I'm working from ground, guys. So if you can take it to that next level, I think that's the engagement that we want our employees to have, taking this as an opportunity rather than a circumstance. That's what I feel.
Thanks for those great examples, Manish and Ashan. I think this brings to life the point I was trying to make, that the way organizations are trying to engage employees is by the way of around well-being, right? And extending it to social well-being or emotional well-being, like Luke had put together, bringing the entire ecosystems in. That's fantastic. Maybe, we could sort of close this topic and shift gears, if I could say so. And Luke, you spoke about, how we are sort of all extrapolating in a way, or I'm sure all of us at some point in time during this last 1.5 years have questioned to say, is mental well-being or is mental health something that I am stuck with? And maybe interpreting the science to say that it could be a crucible moment that I as an individual might be going through. So what are those early signs of mental health that you think we could observe as individuals, as well as, those around us should keep an eye on?
All right. So I'll give you a couple of them. But again, remember, everyone's different. Most people suffer from something called hopelessness. When they lose control, there's death that's happened. There's work on one side. There's uncertainty about the COVID. There's so many things. So you have a feeling of hopelessness, which is very different from mental illness. So one is differentiating hopelessness, reaching out. The first thing is we got to teach people, can you reach out to people for help? We got to teach people to ask for help. A lot of people don't want to ask for help today. They think they can solve all the problems on their own. Some of the symptoms for poor mental awareness is, when you start feeling lethargic, low on energy, even though you slept well, you lose interest in the things that would keep you interested. Your favorite things. You stop talking to people, family members, friends. You slowly put yourself into a box. These are signs. There are also medical signs. You want to look at the blood reports and look at the B12 and D3 levels, because these levels could be below 10. And that would create a feeling of depression, but it's not. The fourth, are you constipated? Do you suffer from 4 to 5 loose motions in a day? Do you have constant bloating and acidity? That symbolizes you have a gut issue. And if you have a gut issue, it creates the feelings of depression, which is why they say the gut-brain axis. Sometimes a lot of people who are depressed come to us, we clean out their gut, they're feeling all good. There was never a problem. So there are many things to look at it. Some people have thoughts of harming themselves, harming other people. These are indicators. Performance dipping from a very, very good employee who's doing really well. All of a sudden, there's a dip, a sudden loss of death or a breakup in a relationship. And the person doesn't seem to be getting better. The emotion is there, but they're sinking lower and lower. So these are some of the most common symptoms that you can, but they have to be broken down, because there are some people who do not show symptoms at all, asymptomatic. They suppress it in them, and then it comes out in anger. They hurt someone, they hurt themselves, or they harm themselves. So you always have to break it down in a very, very professional way before assuming that someone may have mental awareness. And of course, there's a strong message you want to send out to people also. Ask yourself these questions. Just because someone said something to you and you're hurt, don't put yourself into self-pity and label yourself as depressed. Suck it up and move on. We have to also wake up to that reality that we're emotionally becoming very soft as a generation and society, because we're used to getting what we want, when we want. Problem in the company, everyone tries to fix that employee's problem. So we're not making people emotionally strong. So the slightest negativity in their life or failure, they say, oh, I'm depressed because things are not working out their way. So it's a very interesting subject. We can never speculate without a proper diagnosis. We should never assume, but these are some of the symptoms and signs that we see.
I think this is fantastic for us to keep a track to say, what are those signs when we should reach out for help? And I think for me, a takeaway would be enabling all of us, and I don't want to say just organization employees, to be aware, to be intelligent enough to know when there is a problem and what are those coping mechanisms that I should opt for. That's the takeaway for me. Manish, Ashan, I'd also like to hear your views.
I think I quite agree with Luke. I think it's about teaching people to ask for help. That's where the challenge is. I think historically, organizations have had employee assistance programs, 24/7 counseling help. You have got trained doctors, psychiatrists who could support colleagues if they need any help. But the reality is, there is this right? People don't want to ask for help and they try to kind of manage it on their own. And I think what we've been doing is, one, of course, running sessions dedicated to kind of managers or help managers actually spot signs of anxiety, depression, and actually telling them if the colleague says so, this is what it means. You can probably kind of understand this slightly better and different, be more empathetic towards the colleague. And the genuine care has to come out between the manager and the employee so that the employee feels comfortable to kind of speak up to the manager and so on. So that's probably where I think there should be a lot of effort put in, wherein we are encouraging people to ask for help and they're able to share their challenges and concerns. And some of it, like Luke said, all of us do face some disappointment, some anxiety at work, at personal lives and so on, but that doesn't always translate to being a mental health issue. That's part of life. We should probably be able to kind of dissect between the real big problems vis-a-vis things that you face on a day. Everybody will have a good day and a bad day, probably part of life. It's about when you really need expert help, like genuine expert help, then you should ask for help and seek help from the organization or from your employer. Ashan, over to you.
I think Manish covered a lot. In that, while that being said, I think from our experience, something that I want to share is we had work from home series that we did. And also after the first wave, during the second wave, we did lead from home session. Where these kind of, in these sessions, what we embedded was the exact thing what we discussed, how to identify people who's going through stress. Before it becomes into a emotional trauma. What we thought was to have those preventive measures in your organization is very important. So we had a program called Resilience, which really helped. It is not about having any hope during this period. It is about managing and get the best out of the situation from what it is. Because always what happened or people misinterpret is giving a hope and saying it's going to be over. This is going to be the end of things. It's going to be something. Well, as you have seen to what we are in right now, if you have given that wrong message, I think that's when things can go bad to worse. And also, I think, like I mentioned before, empowerment and to have those trigger points and that train at a very operational level with simple tips without making it very complicated. We have created that awareness among employees. And also we have created that support channels, a hotline to reach when they want. And because they will definitely, at times they might not even know that they have problems. That's when your colleagues have to support, identify, do the trigger alarm. Then when that happens, there are a set of intermediates, like the first stage that I mentioned, that has to evaluate and see, what support that is required, or should we reach professional assistance. I think that swing that has to happen properly. Otherwise, you're mismanaging the whole situation, like Luke mentioned before, because the moment you put in the wrong basket, that's where a lot of organizations make bigger mistakes than, damaging more than what they're doing. I think what I want to summarize is in that, number one, to prevent as much as prepare people for conditions so that they would know exactly the situation that they're going to be in. For example, just like we have disaster management drills, right now we are sitting through and, understanding what if COVID positive number reaches this level, what is our plan? We are just doing drills among our teams to understand, so everyone is prepared and that they don't come into that point where they're frozen and don't know what to do anymore, because you always have that conversation. So preparation helps us to overcome that, and also once it's there, to basket it properly, have the right trigger people to understand, do the first aid, and take the professional assistance would be the right way forward and through this.
Right. Thanks for that, Ashan and Manish. I think I'd like to summarize by saying that It's been a great discussion, thought-provoking discussion. The food for thought that we may want to leave for our audience could be, when we are thinking about wellness, we should look at the entire pyramid that Luke laid down for us, which doesn't just talk about nutrition and movement. It also talks about sleep, emotional well-being, and spirituality. And when it comes to enabling our employees, we should look at the principles of, genuinely caring for our employees and enabling them to better take care of themselves. With that, I'll summarize. Thanks everyone for joining us.